What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In MMA, we love a good comeback story. We love an underdog rising from the shadows. But here's the truth that nobody likes to admit. Not every win is created equal. Sometimes a fighter dominates, sometimes a fighter outsmarts, and sometimes a fighter just lands on the right moment at the right time. A lucky punch, a freak injury, a split-second accident that changes everything. Because in this sport, skill wins fights, but timing can turn a highlight into a headline, and a win into a fluke. We're talking about fighters who capitalized on chaos, fighters who caught lightning in the bottle, champions who rewrote their legacy in one bizarre, controversial blink and you miss it moment. And listen, this isn't disrespect, but even the best can benefit from the MMA gods smiling down at them. So sit back, relax, and let's run through 10 fighters who fluked their way to a win. So let's get into it. First on the list, we've got Amanda Nuñes versus Juliana Peña 1. And there is absolutely no doubt in my mind, Juliana Peña won this fight through sheer circumstance. Let's start with the lead up. The fight had to be rebooked because Amanda Nuñes caught COVID. When they finally stepped back into the cage, you could see it. Amanda didn't look like Amanda. He looked drained, out of shape, and honestly, she looked sick. Once the fight started, it became even more obvious. Nuñes completely abandoned her usual calm sniper-like striking. Instead, she came out slinging wild, emotional, and reckless, something we've never seen from her. She gassed out early, which is already a huge red flag, and Peña took full advantage by throwing a barrage of what can only be described as Looney Tunes Dricus du Plessis style punches, and somehow they worked. Then came the submission, a rear naked choke that didn't even look fully locked in. Yet Amanda tapped almost instantly. Fans immediately pointed out that something was wrong, and sure enough, afterward it came out that her camp was rough, and that she was still suffering from the effects of COVID, especially with her lungs. What made this thing even more irritating to fans is that Juliana Peña then went on a full-blown victory tour, talking like she conquered peak Amanda Nuñes. The same Amanda who dominated 2 divisions for years. Luckily, we got the rematch, and that fight was exactly how the first fight should have gone. Amanda destroyed Peña. She outstruck her, outclassed her, dropped her 5 times, and shut down every goofy Nickelodeon barrage Peña threw her way. It wasn't competitive, and it did not deserve a trilogy. That rematch proved one thing beyond any doubt. Juliana Peña's win was a textbook fluke, and even after getting demolished, she still had the nerve to say Amanda retired because she was scared of her. Absolute insanity. Next up is Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira in their first UFC fight. And I already know this take is gonna ruffle some feathers. People love to hype this win. It's on every Alex Pereira highlight reel. It's treated like a masterclass comeback, but when you actually watch the fight, the story is very different. Izzy was winning every single round. He was faster, cleaner, and more technical. He even came seconds away from knocking Pereira out at the end of the first round. Pereira was wobbling like a newborn deer. And here's the crazy part. Izzy was even winning the wrestling exchanges, which is something nobody expected. But to really understand the context here, you have to go back to their kickboxing fights, because even those weren't as clear-cut as Pereira fans think. The first kickboxing fight, Izzy outstruck Pereira and should have won on the scorecards. Most analysts still say it was a robbery. Pereira got the nod anyway. In the second kickboxing fight, Izzy was dominating again and even had Pereira hurt bad. He was close to finishing him. And then out of nowhere, Pereira landed that nuclear left hook and ended the fight. So heading into their UFC fight, Izzy was 0-2 against Pereira, but both losses were razor close and could have easily been chalked up to timing and freak moments. Then the MMA fight happens. Izzy dominates for 4 rounds, and then, once again, Pereira's left hand saves him. It wasn't some masterclass adjustment. It was Pereira simply having a weapon so powerful that even losing the entire fight can still turn into a win with one perfectly timed shot. Call it clutch, call it iconic, call it whatever you want. But by definition, when someone is getting thoroughly outclassed for most of the fight and still wins off of one isolated moment, that's fluky. Izzy proved that in the rematch, when he knocked Pereira out the exact same way he hurt him in round 1 of their first UFC fight. The same setup, the same right hand, That moment showed the truth Izzy had been saying for years. He always knew how to beat Pereira. He was just held back by circumstances, timing, fluke, and that missile Pereira calls a left hook. Now don't get me wrong, Pereira went on to become a phenomenal champion at light heavyweight. He's already a legend. But in terms of this specific win, I might be one of the only people willing to admit it. But yeah, it was a fluke. A beautiful, violent Pereira-style fluke. Moving on to the next fight, we've got Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards 2. The head kick heard around the world. This is the fight that suddenly had people acting like Leon Edwards was some one-shot KO merchant. But I wasn't fooled. I've watched this man's entire career. Leon is a sniper, yes, but he is not a walk-forward death machine who sleeps people with one shot. The narrative came straight from this one moment of lightning striking at the perfect time. When you actually look at how this fight played out, it was as one-sided as it can get. Outside of that beautiful takedown and that back control in round 1, Leon Edwards was getting manhandled. Usman was on his way to a 50-45 decision, cruising, dominating the wrestling exchanges, applying pressure, and slowly breaking Leon down. Leon even looked discouraged, like he knew the moment was slipping away. His corner was freaking out. And then, Leon throws the cleanest, most perfectly timed head kick you'll ever see. Usman slips left, and Leon launches him into the shadow realm. It was a total upset, a historic win, with a legendary post-fight speech. It was goosebumps. But here's where the fluke conversation really starts. Of course they needed to run it back immediately. And unlike the earlier fights we've talked about, Usman didn't win the rematch. So you're probably wondering, if Leon won again, how can the first fight be considered a fluke? Well, let me explain. When you watch their third fight, which took place just months after the knockout, Usman was not the same man. The dude was gun-shy. He wasn't throwing with confidence, wasn't chaining combinations the way he used to, he wasn't walking Leon down the way he was in the first 2 fights. And honestly, who can blame him? Getting flatlined like that changes people. Your reactions slow, your instincts hesitate, and your durability dips. Leon even tried setting up the same head kick sequence multiple times, and every single one got shot down. He couldn't recreate the magic because it was a 1 in a million moment the first time. And if you still don't buy the fluke argument, look what happened afterward. Leon couldn't finish Colby Covington, a guy who himself didn't look anything like his prime self in that fight. And then Leon lost to Bilal Muhammad, someone who wasn't afraid to march forward, throw hands, and wrestle him for 25 minutes. Bilal dropped him on his head. Then Leon's title run fizzles, and that head kick remains his defining moment. This was a classic case of you zigged when you should have zagged. One mistake, one pattern, one perfect kick. A fluke? Definitely. But skill for skill, round for round, that second fight did not reflect the reality of their careers. And that is why this one lands firmly in fluke territory. Alright, this next one is kind of cheating, because it's not just one fight, it's a collection. It's a greatest hits album of questionable circumstances. We're talking about Henry Cejudo's entire title run. Let's start with the big one. Cejudo versus Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, the greatest flyweight of all time. Now listen, I'll be fair, it was competitive. Cejudo made real adjustments, he wrestled well, he survived early trouble, but let's not rewrite history here. That fight could have easily gone to DJ. Many fans, analysts, even some fighters still argue that Mighty Mouse should have gotten the nod. It was an impressive win, sure, but not some dominant dethroning. It was the definition of debatable. Then we move on to the title defense against TJ Dillashaw, and this is where the fluke radar kicks in. TJ, the 135-pound champ, cuts down to 125 for the first time in his career. And when I say he looked bad on the scale, I mean he looked like Nosferatu, pale, shaking, sunken. He looked absolutely cooked, and the fight played out exactly how you'd expect. Cejudo touches him one time, Dillashaw's legs evaporate, and the fight is over in 32 seconds. Later, we find out TJ became anemic during the cut. He literally took EPO to survive the weight cut. His chin was gone before the bell even rang. So yeah, not exactly the most legitimate title defense in UFC history. Then Henry moves up to 135 and fights Marlon Moraes for the vacant belt. And this one was legit. No excuses, no chaos, no PED drama, just a great performance. Cejudo absolutely took Moraes' soul that night. Respect. But then, we get to the Dominic Cruz fight, and the pattern returns. Cruz takes a fight on short notice because COVID restrictions wiped out the original matchup with Jose Aldo. Not only that, Cruz was coming off shoulder surgery, years of inactivity, and had basically zero time to get into championship shape. In the fight, Cruz was moving well, but clearly rusty. And then comes the controversial ending. Keith Peterson steps in after Cejudo knocks down Cruz, calls the fight as Cruz is getting up, and suddenly we're in the middle of the greatest rep versus fighter rivalry in history. If you know, you know. The memes, the interviews, the Keith smelled like alcohol and cigarettes moment, and then Cejudo retires, and then unretires, and goes on a losing streak. Look, nobody is denying Henry's skill. He's an Olympic gold medalist, double champ, great fight IQ, great resume. But if we're talking fluky wins or circumstantial victories that aged weirdly, Cejudo's title run is basically the poster child. A close win over DJ, a compromised Dillashaw, and a short notice post-surgery Cruz with a questionable stoppage. Even for Henry Cejudo, the MMA gods were definitely lending a helping hand. Moving on, the next fight on the list is Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria. This specific win is, in my opinion, the clearest example of a fluke created by circumstance, timing, and questionable decision-making from Volk's team. First off, Volkanovski had absolutely no business being in the octagon that night. The man was coming off a violent head kick knockout loss to Islam Makhachev only 3 months beforehand. 3 months. That's not enough time for your brain to fully recover, your chin to reset, or your confidence to stabilize. That's barely enough time to heal from a sprained ankle, let alone a knockout from one of the most dominant champions in the sport. Now, do I believe Ilia Topuria could have knocked out Volk under normal circumstances? Yes. Ilia is fast, powerful, and has some of the cleanest countering in the division. But would it have happened this easily, this quickly, and this decisively if Volk's brain had actually recovered? I don't think so. And that's the problem. Everyone knew this turnaround was too fast. Even analysts who picked Ilia were saying Volk's taking a huge risk here. Fans weren't asking if Ilia could knock him out. The conversation became, how damaged is Volk's chin after the Islam KO? Before the fight even started, people were already prepping the Volk should have waited longer talking points. Then the fight itself happens, and Volk actually looks sharp. His timing was good, his movement was clean, he was reading Ilia well, but once Ilia landed the first real barrage, that first big combination, that was it. Volk's lights shut off immediately. No gradual breakdown, no prolonged punishment, just one clean sequence, and the longtime featherweight king was unconscious. That is classic compromised chin behavior. That is post-KO vulnerability at its peak. That is not the Volk we saw fight Max Holloway 3 times. It's not even the Volk who fought Islam the first time. Volkanovski has historically been one of the most durable fighters in MMA, taking bombs from Max, Ortega, Mendes, Yair, and walking through them like nothing. But suddenly, 3 months after the worst KO of his career, he gets flatlined by the first major combination Ilia lands. Like I said before, Ilia has power. No one's doubting that. But come on, we know what that is. And look at how the MMA world reacted. Even Topuria fans weren't bragging about Volk being washed. They were acknowledging the timing. The storyline instantly became Volk came back too soon, Volk's chin wasn't healed, and this doesn't tell us the full picture. Volk took time off, healed up, and instantly looked better in his comeback. This wasn't some masterclass from Ilia, this was a perfect collision of Volk's worst possible moment meeting Ilia's best. A convergence of unfortunate timing disguised as a dominant win. Volk eventually regained the belt. But whether people want to admit it or not, this fight was the definition of a fluke created by circumstance, not just skill. On to the next fight. Glover Teixeira versus Yuri Prochazka, one of the greatest title fights ever. And at the exact same time, one of the flukiest endings we've ever seen in the UFC Championship bout. We all love Yuri, but does that make what happened any less ridiculous? No, because let's keep it real. Glover was winning this fight. Not a blowout, not a domination, but he was consistently one step ahead. Old man strength, veteran IQ, and that I've seen every position in MMA history confidence were carrying him. Then the moment that inspired half of the MMA community, including you and me, to question the meaning of life. Glover hurts Yuri bad. Yuri is on skates. He's cooked. He's ready to be finished. All Glover has to do is keep punching. Just keep punching. And he walks out, still the champion. But instead, he jumps the fucking ghillie. Bro, every time I think about this, my brain shuts down. This was the definition of why would you do that. You're seconds away from a TKO. You're about to beat the scariest man at 205 at the time. And your big idea is let me jump for this low percentage Hail Mary Gilly that rarely works for anyone, not named Charles Oliveira. And as expected, he fails it. Of course he fails it, because 99.9% of the time, jumping the Gilly ruins your momentum, your position, and of course, Yuri ends up on top. A gift from the MMA gods. And that's what eventually leads to the finishing sequence. Yuri somehow, from top, tired, battered, late in the 5th round, grabs a rear naked choke with no hooks in, and Glover taps. I love Yuri. I'm glad he got the belt. But let's not rewrite history. That choke was the direct result of Glover making one of the worst split-second decisions in championship history. And this moment right here, it created the light heavyweight hot potato era. Yuri wins, injures his shoulder, then vacates. Jamal Hill wins the vacant belt, injures himself, and vacates. The belt becomes cursed until Alex Pereira showed up and brought stability and order to the division. All because Glover jumped the damn Gilly. If there was ever a fight that showcased how one tiny decision can shift an entire division, this was it. Next up, we got Ben Askren versus Jorge Masvidal, the fastest knockout in UFC history, and one of the most shared clips in combat sports. 5 seconds, that's all it took. One flying knee, one unconscious wrestler, and one overnight superstar in Jorge Masvidal. And look, I'm not here to pretend that knee wasn't iconic. It was. It turned Masvidal into a global name and basically gave him a rebirth in the sport. But was it a fluke? Absolutely. Let's be real for a second. If this fight unfolded for even 1 minute longer, we all know what was coming. Ben Askren is not the best striker. He's not flashy, and he's not particularly fast. But the dude can wrestle. And historically, every time Masvidal went against a heavy chain wrestling grinder, he struggled. His losses to Usman, Maia, and Covington showed the same thing. When you consistently take Masvidal down, he doesn't fight well. The entire matchup was built around one question. Can Ben get Jorge down? If he did, it would have been a long night for Gamebred. But Ben made the critical mistake that defined his whole career. He shoots immediately. No setup, no jab, no feints, no strikes to disguise the level change. Masvidal saw that pattern from a mile away and literally drilled the exact knee for weeks because he knew Ben always entered the same way. And credit to him, he didn't just land it. He sent Askren's soul to voicemail. But here's the thing. Executing something that fast, that clean, and that perfectly timed is the definition of lightning in the bottle. If you ran this fight 99 more times, Masvidal probably never lands that knee again with the same accuracy and force. The planets aligned. Masvidal parlayed that 5-second moment into superstardom. The BMF belt, pay-per-view headliners, and title shots. The whole 9 yards. But when you strip away the hype, the beef, the theatrics, and the slow-mo replays, what you're left with is simple. If Ben Askren didn't level change, Masvidal wouldn't have gotten that KO. Impressive? Yes. Strategic? Yes. A fluke? 100%. Next up, Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza 2. Arguably the worst title fight in UFC history. And in my opinion, the fight that single-handedly killed strawweight height for years to come. And listen, I don't say that lightly, but when the championship fight makes fans question why they even watch MMA, then we gotta talk about it. The reason I label Carla Esparza's win a fluke is simple. She won the belt for literally doing maybe 1 or 2 more things than Rose in a fight where neither woman tried to engage for 25 minutes straight. 25 minutes of air punching, feinting at ghosts, circling each other, and landing the lowest combined total strikes in a title fight that I've ever seen. It was the kind of fight that made the judges stare at each other like, bro, we actually have to score this. Carla didn't win because she beat Rose. She won because somebody had to leave with the belt. And she did slightly more of the nothing that they both agreed on doing. This fight also marked a massive turning point in Rose Namajunas' popularity. This was someone who used to be revered as a potential women's MMA GOAT. A fighter with highlight reel finishes, insane performances, and huge fan support. After Esparza 2, people genuinely forgot when she was fighting. The excitement around the Rose fight evaporated overnight. Since then, she's picked up a couple wins at flyweight, but let's be real, the spark hasn't returned. And to be fully transparent with you guys, I've never liked Rose's title runs. She's always won the belt in impressive fashion. No one can take that away. But every single time she became champion, the same narrative would always pop up. The pressure is too much, I'm overwhelmed, being champion is hard, and every time I'd hear that, I would think to myself, here we go again. As for Carla Esparza, you already know how that story ended. She went on to fight Zhang Weili, got dominated, got submitted, and eventually retired. And in a weird way, her title win symbolizes exactly why this fight is a fluke. It was a moment the division immediately corrected as soon as she fought someone actually willing to fight. Rose versus Carla 2 wasn't just a bad fight. It was a cosmic misfire, a glitch in the MMA matrix, a championship bout where the belt changed hands not because of domination, but because of math, because somebody had to win. And that is as fluky as it gets. Next up, we've got Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier. And this one is interesting because the word fluke didn't even come from me. It didn't come from the fans. It came from DC himself. Stipe Miocic had already cemented himself as one of the greatest heavyweights ever. He's beat the who's who of the division, including a dominant decision win over Francis Ngannou, surviving shots that would knock the soul out of most fighters. Meanwhile, Daniel Cormier was coming off a clean, dominant submission win over Volkan Oezdemir and was making his big move up to heavyweight for that champ status. And then, one short right hook in the clinch, Stipe drops. DC becomes the 2-division world champion. Then he called out Brock Lesnar. It became a viral moment. But when you look at that trilogy in hindsight, the first fight starts feeling a little suspicious. Because in the rematch, Stipe struggled early. Sure, DC was in control for the first couple rounds, but once Stipe made the proper adjustments and started ripping that liver like he was tenderizing carne asada, the whole fight flipped. He chopped DC down with body shots, and suddenly the heavyweight GOAT was back. Then in the rubber match, Stipe looked even sharper. He seemed to be one step ahead of Cormier the entire fight. Meanwhile, DC, although still dangerous, wasn't the same version we saw in the first fight. He looked slower, older, and weathered. And this is where it gets interesting. DC flat out admitted that he might have gotten lucky in the first fight. His reasoning? He believes Stipe may have been chinny after going through the absolute hell with Francis Ngannou. DC literally said that when fighters go through wars, the kind where you're absorbing nuclear-level power shots, their durability can take a permanent hit. And if there's anyone whose shots can take years off your career, it's Francis Ngannou's. So DC's logic was, maybe I caught him at the perfect time. That's DC's words, not mine. And to be fair, if we're being consistent, you could argue Stipe's second win had a bit of flukiness too. DC fought after back surgery, couldn't train properly, and came into the fight compromised. But even with that caveat, the trilogy as a whole paints a clear picture. Stipe was the better fighter across most of their minutes together. DC's one punch in the first fight was lightning in the bottle. Even DC believes timing played a major role. So yes, DC is a legend, a 2-division champion and an all-time great. But his first win over Stipe, that was the definition of a perfect moment, not a definitive victory. A fluke straight from the source himself. Finally, we get to the most recent entry in the fluke win conversation. Joshua Van defeating Alexandre Pantoja at UFC 323. This fight is the inspiration for this video. And listen, I want to make this very clear before I dive in. Joshua Van is legit. He's talented, explosive, calm under pressure, and he's probably going to be a problem for the division for years to come. But when we're talking flukes, not robberies, not lucky punches, not comebacks, but pure bizarre, this shouldn't have happened like that moments in MMA, yeah, this one is sitting comfortably near the top of that list. Let's break down why. 1. The fight was over in 26 seconds, and not because of Joshua Van's striking. Most flukes come from outcomes that tell us nothing about who the fighter is. And this is textbook definition. Pantoja throws a high kick. Van catches it. Pantoja slips, posts his arm, and it snaps. That's it. No exchanges, no reads, no pace, no momentum, no battle of styles, just an awkward fall at the exact wrong angle. And suddenly, we've got a new flyweight champion. You can't watch that and say, yeah, that told us everything we needed to know. 2, it was a non-combat injury. This wasn't Van landing a nuke. This wasn't a slick submission. This wasn't a perfectly timed counter. This was a champion getting injured by gravity. Fans always call something a fluke when the winning blow wasn't a blow at all. When the champ injures themselves in under 30 seconds, people immediately go, alright, but can Van actually beat Pantoja? It's a totally fair question. 3. Pantoja came in with years of mileage. Let's be honest here. Pantoja has been through hell in the octagon. 5-round scrambles, wars, grappling marathons. Every fight took a piece of him. So when he goes down from a weird freakish fall, fans didn't say Joshua Van dethroned the king. They said Pantoja's body is finally failing him. And that's not a knock on Van. That's just how the storyline looked. Nothing got answered. Literally nothing. A real title fight gives us answers. Who's faster? Who adjusts better? Does the champ still have it? Is the young guy the real deal? How do they look in the deep rounds? This fight answered none of that. Critics aren't saying Van is bad. They're saying we still don't know. And that's how the fluke conversations start. When the champion loses and the entire MMA community, fans, fighters, journalists, random guys in the comments, all simultaneously yell run it back, that tells you the result didn't sit right with anybody. People didn't walk away thinking we witnessed the passing of the torch. They walked away thinking we witnessed a medical emergency. That's not the same thing. Even the people who love Joshua Van say stuff like that. I'm happy for Van. He accomplished something that most fighters don't, and he's able to support his family now. But the bottom line is, it's not his fault, but it was a fluke. It's not his fault Pantoja got hurt, but the context is why fans talk. This wasn't a war. It wasn't an upset. It wasn't even a statement. It was an accident that happened during a fight, and the belt changed hands because of it. And that, my friends, is why Joshua Van versus Pantoja topped so many fluke win conversations today. And there you have it, boys. 10 moments in MMA history where the stars aligned, the chaos hit just right, and the MMA gods handed out blessings left and right. Some of these wins were emotional, some were controversial, some were straight up accidents, but that's what makes this sport beautiful and infuriating at the same time. Because in MMA, you can spend years perfecting your craft just to have everything decided by one perfectly timed punch, one mental lapse, one weird scramble, or one injury that had nothing to do with the actual fight. It's why we argue, it's why we debate, it's why we love this shit. So whether you agree with me, disagree with me, or think I'm completely insane, drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me which fights you think were flukes, which fights weren't, and which ones I should have added to the list. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell so you never miss another breakdown, recap, or full-on rant. I appreciate every single one of you for watching. This is the Beever MMA, and I'll catch you in the next one.